Before you start shooting, you think, actually, okay, this is the scene where, that thing that we were talking about, I think this is where we could really, we can really sort of go to town on it. I was talking to Roger Michelle, about some of the compositions, about finding something different in material which is, seemingly, straightforward, and a world that is familiar, but then finding the otherness in it, finding something which is just slightly off kilter. I mean, this is an espionage story. It's a murky world that is strange and is going to get stranger for this character. A lot of the compositions are quite even that. It's very strong. Low angle, wide shot. Again, the sort of an attempt to sort of break out of normal sort of Hollywood sort of coverage, if you like. With sort of smaller cameras, there would have been far more unusual angles, coming through. Although there have been, ones from the early part of the century, from the surrealists and from the early photographers. But that the sort of the chance in a filmmaking setting to sort of tell a different story in a different way. That would be the sort of thing that we did with Christopher Jefferies. The sort of huge part of the back, and then the face was tucked into the corner of the screen. Not only does it feel quite intimate, I think, but it's slightly discombobulating. We used it in Christopher Jefferies over the shoulder of the questioning detectives, and it sort of reduced him, in the eyes of the detectives. I mean, you could read that here as they're all figures in the great machine of Her Majesty's government. You've been looking at the scene in script form. I think you would definitely make the connection for that particular scene to be shot that way. As an overall language, you've had numerous conversations before shooting, and it's become the reference point for you and the director, from quite early on. So that's already instilled, and you may even say before you start shooting, think, actually, okay, this is the scene where, that thing that we were talking about, I think this is where we could really, we can really sort of go to town on it, and then there will be others where you think, well, maybe this is not quite so appropriate. Again, it's like a sort of off-kilter world, it's almost sort of Alice in Wonderland. I mean, I think that the first influences for me was photojournalism. That would have first made me aware of images and certainly composition. I mean, I think one of the most influential books I ever got, the book that Harold Evans brought out, called Pictures on a Page, was very big on photojournalism. Harold Evans put a lot of, he gave it great prominence, the fact that a picture could tell the story. So photography had a big presence in the paper, and this was a book that was him basically telling the story of photojournalism, but also this is my theory of it, today. And this was brought out in the mid-70s, this book. And I remember seeing that, and just the idea that a photograph could be taken in a number of different ways, and it's a mixture of being in the right place at the right time, but choosing the decisive moment, and making something out of perhaps sort of unpromising circumstances. All those things that in documentaries that you realise are essential lessons to have learned. But the power of the image, is would have been something that I would have been drawn to long before I even thought of cinematography.